Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first story is titled Justice Prevails Against Unjust Landlord. As I look back on my life, I can see how far I've come. There was a time when I was married to a man who was emotionally abusive and belittling. For 6 years, I was subjected to his cruelty and treated like nothing more than a baby-making machine. Even after I gave him 2 children, he continued to treat me poorly and make me feel insignificant. Finally, I woke up and decided that I couldn't take it anymore. I left him, taking only my clothes, a car worth $4,000, and my computer. With nothing but my determination to survive and take care of my children, I moved into a townhouse with roommates. The townhouse was in poor condition, and I had to work 3 to 4 jobs just to make ends meet. But over time, I managed to save enough money to buy furniture and make the place livable. I was happy to have a roof over my head and provide a safe home for my children. However, my happiness was short-lived when I realized that my landlord, whom I will refer to as SBL, was a shady character. He would often show up at my door, claiming that he needed to fix something in the house, but I could sense that he had ulterior motives. His words had a hint of sexual undertones that made me feel uneasy. Still, I tried to ignore it, and as long as I paid my rent on time, he was nice to me. As time went on, I found a better home in the mountains nearby, and I was excited to move into it. But according to my lease agreement, I had to give SBL 1 month's notice before moving out. I sent him an email informing him of my intention to move out in 3 weeks, and that if he couldn't find a new tenant, I would still fulfill my legal obligation and pay next month's rent. To my surprise, he replied within a week, saying that he had found a new tenant, and I would be off the hook for the next month's rent. But a couple of days later, my roommate had a load of laundry running when the washing machine malfunctioned and water flooded the entire kitchen and living room. We did our best to clean up the mess, but the damage was severe. SBL had to call in an appliance repairman and insurance adjusters to assess the damage. They found that the washer had not been serviced for years and needed significant repairs. The next week was chaotic, with workers coming and going, and I had to take time off work to supervise the repairs. When it was finally time to move out, I was surprised to find that SBL had let himself in and was taking pictures of everything as the movers were packing up my stuff. He thanked me for my generosity in leaving the house clean and said that I wouldn't have to worry about my deposit. But just 2 weeks after moving out, I received a summons to appear in arbitration because SBL was suing me for damages. He claimed that I was responsible for the damage caused by the flooding and that I owed him money for repairs and a missed month's rent from the new tenant who backed out. I was shocked and couldn't believe that he was doing this to me. I had 10 days to prepare for the arbitration meeting. I was determined to fight back and not let him get away with his bullying tactics. I spent hours researching tenancy and landlord laws and gathered evidence to support my case. I also talked to other tenants who had similar experiences with SBL and got sworn statements from them. On the day of the meeting, I arrived in a power suit, ready to present my case. SBL went first and spent over 40 minutes presenting his case, which included frivolous claims, and as I was waiting for the police to arrive, I remembered how SBL used to harass me with his creepy behavior and sexual innuendos, and a surge of anger coursed through my veins. I knew that I couldn't let him get away with this kind of behavior, not only towards me, but towards any other vulnerable tenants that he might be preying on. Once I received my deposit back, I contacted the local tenants' rights organization to report SBL's abusive behavior. I spoke to a lawyer who was well-versed in landlord-tenant laws and regulations, and she agreed to take my case pro bono. With her help, I decided to file a lawsuit against SBL for his harassment and abuse of power. I knew it wouldn't be an easy fight, but I was determined to hold him accountable for his actions. After several months of legal proceedings and negotiations, we finally reached a settlement agreement. SBL was required to attend a workshop on tenant rights and was placed on a probationary period where he would be subject to regular inspections of his rental properties by a local housing authority. I was satisfied with the outcome, and I hoped that SBL would learn his lesson and change his behavior towards his tenants. However, I soon found out that the probationary period was not enough to deter him from continuing his abusive practices. A few months later, I received a call from a former neighbor who had just moved out of one of SBL's rental properties. She told me that SBL had threatened her with eviction when she complained about a leaky faucet in her bathroom. She also said that several other tenants in the building were experiencing similar issues but were too afraid to speak up. I knew that I couldn't sit idly by and watch SBL continue to mistreat his tenants. I contacted the local housing authority and reported the violations. Inspectors were sent to investigate the complaints, and they found numerous violations of housing codes and safety regulations. SBL was fined heavily and was forced to make extensive repairs to his properties. He was also placed on a watch list, which meant that any new rental property he acquired would be subject to rigorous inspections before he could rent it out. In the end, justice was served, and SBL was finally held accountable for his abusive behavior. I was glad that I had taken a stand against him, and I hoped that my actions would inspire other tenants to do the same. Update. I recently found out that SBL has sold off all his rental properties and moved out of town. While I'm relieved that he's no longer a landlord, I'm still vigilant about ensuring that all tenants are treated with respect and dignity. I have continued my work with the Tenants' Rights Organization and have become an advocate for renters' rights in my community. I believe that every tenant deserves to live in safe and habitable housing and should be treated with fairness and respect by their landlords. In my opinion, this story is a prime example of how persistence and determination can pay off in the end. It's amazing to see how the author went from being a victim of a bully landlord to being the one who triumphed in the end. The way she gathered evidence and built her case was impressive, and it's great to see that justice was served. It's also inspiring to see how the author didn't just stop at winning the arbitration case, but went on to warn others and even camped out to get her deposit back. Overall, this story is a reminder that even in tough situations, it's important to stand up for oneself and not back down. The next story is titled, Neighbor Replaced Fence with a Brick Wall and Stole Property, Claims He Owns Garden. My grandparents had been living in their home for over 40 years, and in all that time, they had never had a problem with their neighbor. He seemed friendly enough, always greeting them with a wave and a smile when they passed by his house. But over time, they began to notice a change in his behavior. He started to become increasingly irritable, finding fault with anything my grandparents did, no matter how small or insignificant. One day when my grandparents were away on vacation, their neighbor seized the opportunity to make a bold move. He decided to replace the fence between their properties with a large brick wall, claiming that it was his right to do so. When my grandparents returned home, they were shocked to find the wall blocking off half of their yard and damaging their beloved flower garden. When they told me what had happened, I was furious. I couldn't believe that someone could be so callous and cruel. I knew that something had to be done, but I wasn't sure where to start. So I began to research the legalities of property rights and boundaries. I spent hours poring over documents and talking to lawyers, determined to find a way to make things right. Eventually, I learned that the wall had been built without a permit and was in violation of several zoning laws. Armed with this information, I went to the local government officials and presented my case. I showed them pictures of the wall and how it had encroached on my grandparents' property. I explained how it had destroyed their garden and made it impossible for them to enjoy their own backyard. After weeks of back and forth, the officials finally agreed to investigate the matter. They sent a team of surveyors to the property to determine the exact boundaries and ownership of the land. It was a long and arduous process, but finally, the surveyors confirmed what we had suspected all along. The wall had been built entirely on my grandparents' property. With this information in hand, I contacted the neighbor and demanded that he remove the wall at his own expense. At first, he was defiant, insisting that he had every right to build the wall and that my grandparents were the ones in the wrong. But I refused to back down, and eventually he relented. However, just when we thought the matter was settled, things took a sudden and unexpected turn. One night my grandparents woke up to find that their car had been vandalized. The windows had been smashed and the tires had been slashed. We immediately suspected the neighbor, but we had no proof. It wasn't until a few weeks later that we finally caught him in the act. My grandparents had installed security cameras around their property, and one night, they captured footage of the neighbor trying to sneak into their yard. We called the police, and they arrested him on the spot. It turned out that he had been angry with my grandparents for standing up to him and insisting that he remove the wall. He had taken it as a personal affront and had decided to get revenge by damaging their property. The police charged him with vandalism and trespassing, and he was ordered to pay for the damages to the car. In the end, justice was served, and my grandparents were able to reclaim their property and their peace of mind. But the experience left them shaken and distrustful of their neighbor. They never spoke to him again and made sure to keep a close eye on their surroundings. The whole ordeal was a reminder of how important it is to stand up for what's right, even in the face of adversity. It also showed me the power of perseverance and determination. If we had given up at any point during the process, we may have never been able to reclaim our property or bring our neighbor to justice. It took weeks of research, countless meetings with officials, and a lot of time and effort, but it was all worth it in the end. However, the story doesn't end there. A few months later, my grandparents received a letter in the mail from their neighbor. It was a written apology in which he admitted that he had been wrong to build the wall and damage their property. He also offered to pay for any remaining damages and to help them replant their flower garden. My grandparents were shocked by the gesture, but they were also relieved. It was clear that their neighbor had realized the error of his ways and was genuinely sorry for what he had done. They decided to accept his apology and allow him to make things right. Over the next few weeks, the neighbor worked tirelessly to repair the damage he had caused. He removed the remaining pieces of the wall and installed a new fence exactly where the old one had been. He also helped my grandparents replant their garden, spending hours in the dirt and sun, making sure that each flower was placed just right. It was a remarkable transformation, and one that no one could have predicted. My grandparents' neighbor had gone from being a bitter and vengeful person to a compassionate and kind-hearted one. They even started to chat with him from time to time, and the tension that had once existed between them had dissipated. The experience taught all of us an important lesson about forgiveness and the power of redemption. We never could have imagined that our neighbor would be capable of such a turnaround, but it just goes to show that people can surprise us in the most unexpected ways. In the end, my grandparents' yard was restored to its former glory, and their relationship with their neighbor was stronger than ever. It was a happy ending to what had started as a difficult and trying situation, and it left us all with a sense of hope and optimism for the future. In my opinion, this story is a great example of how standing up for what's right can ultimately lead to a positive outcome. It's inspiring to see how the protagonist worked tirelessly to fight for his grandparents' property rights, and how their determination paid off in the end. The fact that the neighbor ultimately apologized and made things right was a great reminder that people can change and that forgiveness can go a long way. Overall, it was a heartwarming story that left me feeling hopeful and optimistic. The next story is titled, Airbnb Hosts Unfair Review Backfires, Costing Them Hundreds. I was eagerly anticipating a weekend trip with my girlfriend and her beloved dog. We had planned to attend a friend's wedding in a nearby town, and we thought it would be great to rent an Airbnb that would allow us to bring the furry friend along. After scouring the platform, we finally found a lovely place that ticked all the boxes. It was affordable, pet-friendly, and in a convenient location. We arrived on a sunny Friday afternoon, excited to get settled into our home away from home. We were greeted by the owner, who introduced himself and gave us a brief tour of the property. Everything seemed fine, and we were pleased with the space. A few minutes later, we took the dog outside to stretch her legs, and the owner followed us out. He noticed the dog and asked if we had disclosed her presence during the booking process. I realized that I had forgotten to tick the box that indicated we were bringing a pet, and I immediately apologized and offered to pay the $25 fee. However, the host refused to take the money, saying that he loved dogs and that it was no big deal. Over the next 2 days, we enjoyed our stay at the Airbnb. We kept the place clean and tidy, and the dog was well behaved, so we didn't encounter any issues. On the day of our departure, we received an email from Airbnb asking us to leave a review of our experience. I was pleased with our stay, so I left a glowing 5-star review praising the property and the owner for their hospitality. However, my happiness was short-lived when I received a notification that the host had left me a review that wasn't as kind. In his review, he accused me of not disclosing the dog's presence and of leaving her alone in the house for hours on end. I was taken aback by his accusations, as we had made it clear that we were bringing the dog and had never left her alone in the house. I tried to reach out to the host to resolve the issue, but he didn't respond. Feeling wronged, I contacted Airbnb's customer service team to report the unfair review. They told me that they would investigate the matter and get back to me within a few days. In the meantime, I tried to move on from the experience and enjoy the rest of my weekend. A few days later, I received an email from Airbnb's security team informing me that they had looked into the matter and had found that the host had violated their policies by showing up unannounced at the property. They also confirmed that my dog had not caused any damage or left any mess, and that there was no evidence to support the host's claims that we had left her alone for extended periods. As a result of their investigation, Airbnb refunded 2/3 of our stay, which amounted to around $200. While I was happy with the resolution, I still felt wronged by the host's unfair review. I decided to write a response to his review, detailing the events of our stay and pointing out the discrepancies in his claims. A few days after my response was posted, I received a message from the host himself. He apologized for his behavior and admitted that he had been having a rough time in his personal life, which had caused him to lash out unfairly. He asked me to forgive him and to remove my response to his review. I was touched by his apology and agreed to remove my response. However, the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, I received a call from Airbnb's legal department. They informed me that they had received multiple reports from other guests who had stayed at the host's property and had also experienced unprofessional behavior and mistreatment. As a result, Airbnb had decided to take legal action against the host and revoke his listing privileges on the platform. They also offered me an additional $500 in compensation for my troubles. I was shocked to hear about the extent of the host's misbehavior and grateful to Airbnb for taking decisive action. It made me realize how important it is for platforms like Airbnb to have robust policies in place to protect their users from abusive hosts or guests. I was also pleased to see that my decision to report the unfair review had ultimately led to justice being served. It felt good to know that I had played a small role in holding the host accountable for his actions, and ensuring that other guests would not have to endure the same mistreatment. In the end, the experience taught me an important lesson about standing up for myself and not letting others take advantage of me. It also reminded me of the power of online reviews and how they can influence the decisions of future guests. From now on, I'll be sure to carefully read and respond to all reviews, whether positive or negative, to ensure that my voice is heard and that others can benefit from my experiences. In my opinion, this was a fascinating story that highlights the importance of standing up for oneself when facing injustice. It's unfortunate that the host in this case was so unprofessional and disrespectful towards the guest, but it's heartening to see that Airbnb took decisive action to hold him accountable. It's a reminder of the power of online reviews and how they can be used to help others make informed decisions. Overall, I think the guest handled the situation with grace and integrity, and I'm glad that justice was ultimately served. The last story is titled, "Drank a Beer So I Wouldn't Be Forced to Babysit for My Cousin's Wedding." My cousin's wedding was a big deal for our family. We had all been looking forward to it for months, especially since it was going to be held in a beautiful countryside estate that had been rented out for the occasion. But for me, there was always the underlying dread that I would once again be stuck babysitting the younger kids. You see, as the youngest of my generation, I had been designated as the go-to babysitter for all family events. It didn't matter if it was a birthday party or a holiday gathering, I was always expected to take care of the kids so that the adults could relax and have fun. It wasn't that I disliked kids, but I was tired of always being the one responsible for them. I wanted to be able to enjoy myself without worrying about watching them every second of the night. So when my mom promised me that I wouldn't have to babysit at my cousin's wedding, I was over the moon. I had big plans for the night. I was going to try all the different craft beers that were being served, dance the night away, and hopefully even meet some cute girls. But as soon as we arrived at the estate, my aunt informed me that the sitter had canceled and I would be responsible for watching the kids. I tried to argue with her, telling her that my mom had promised me I wouldn't have to babysit, but she was adamant. "You're young and energetic," she said. "The kids will love spending time with you." I felt trapped, but I didn't want to let it ruin my night. I decided to make the best of it and try to have fun with the kids. But as soon as we entered the reception hall, chaos ensued. The kids were running around, screaming and knocking things over. I tried to calm them down, but it was no use. As I was struggling to get a handle on the situation, my uncle handed me a beer. At first, I hesitated. I'd never been much of a drinker, and I didn't want to do anything that would put the kids in danger. But then I figured that a little liquid courage might make it easier to handle the kids. I took a sip and felt the tension start to melt away. I started to relax and actually have fun with the kids. We played games and danced to the music, and I even got some compliments from the other guests on how well I was handling the situation. But then my aunt walked over and saw me with the beer. She immediately started yelling at me, telling me that I couldn't drink while I was responsible for the kids. I tried to explain that I didn't have a choice, but she wouldn't listen. Feeling frustrated and trapped, I decided to take a different approach. I held up my beer and announced to the entire reception that I would finish it in exchange for someone else taking over babysitting duty. Everyone looked at me in shock, but I was determined to make it work. My aunt started to argue with me, but my dad stepped in and offered to watch the kids for the rest of the night. I felt a huge weight lifted off my shoulders as I handed the kids over to him and took another swig of my beer. As the night went on, I continued to enjoy myself, trying different beers and dancing with my family. But as the reception was winding down, something unexpected happened. My cousin's new mother-in-law came up to me and thanked me for taking care of the kids all night. Apparently my aunt had been bad-mouthing me to the other guests, saying that I was lazy and irresponsible. The mother-in-law's words caught me by surprise. I couldn't believe my aunt would say those things about me behind my back. I felt hurt and angry, but I didn't want to let it ruin the night. I thanked the mother-in-law and continued dancing, trying to forget about the whole ordeal. But then something even more unexpected happened. One of the kids, a little girl named Lily, came up to me with tears in her eyes. "Are you leaving?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I crouched down to her level and wiped away her tears. "No, I'm not leaving," I said. "Why do you ask?" "Because I don't want you to go," she said. "You're the only one who played with me all night." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been so focused on trying to get out of babysitting that I hadn't even realized how much the kids had needed me. I felt ashamed of myself for wanting to abandon them. From that moment on, I decided to make it my mission to be the best babysitter I could be. I played with the kids and made sure they were having a good time, even when it meant sacrificing my own fun. And in the end, it was worth it. As we were leaving the estate, my aunt came up to me and apologized for her behavior earlier. She said that she had been stressed out and took it out on me unfairly. I forgave her, but I also made it clear that I wouldn't tolerate being treated that way again. The wedding ended up being a turning point for me. I realized that I had been too focused on my own desires and not thinking about how my actions affected others. I still enjoy having a good time, but now I make sure that I'm responsible and considerate of those around me. As for Lily, she ended up becoming one of my favorite kids to babysit. She always had a smile on her face and reminded me of why I love spending time with kids in the first place. Update: since the wedding, I've continued to be a reliable and responsible babysitter for my family. In fact, I've even started volunteering at a local children's charity, where I get to work with kids from all different backgrounds. It's been a fulfilling experience and has taught me even more about the joys of spending time with kids. In my opinion, this story was really relatable. I think most of us have been in situations where we feel like we're being taken advantage of, and it's hard to know how to stand up for ourselves without causing conflict. I liked how the protagonist was able to find a creative solution to his problem and still have a good time at the wedding. And the twist with the little girl at the end was really heartwarming. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you